When you think of John Lennon, you probably picture peace signs, bed-ins, and poetic lyrics about imagining a better world. But beneath the round glasses and all that give peace a chance energy was a man who could absolutely roast you into oblivion. Today, we're diving into the 6 bands Lennon famously couldn't stand. And trust me, by the time we hit number 1, you'll be questioning everything. 6. The Monkees. Ah yes, the Monkees. America's answer to the Beatles if the Beatles had been written by TV executives in a boardroom. Most people just laughed them off as a cute little copycat group. But John, he took it personally, like really personally. It all kicked off when the Monkees' popularity started catching up to the Beatles in the US. John's reaction. Basically, they're about as much a band as Mickey Mouse is a real mouse. Oof, and it didn't stop there. When Monkees guitarist Mike Nesmith visited a Beatles recording session, John apparently turned the sarcasm dial up to 11, tossing out comments like, "This is how real musicians work," and allegedly telling Nesmith to run along like he was a child wandering onto a film set. Brutal. But the most savage moment came later, in a London club, when Lennon, slightly buzzed, apparently told Davy Jones, "When people call out, 'Hey Beatle,' I hate it because it makes me feel like a product. When they call out, 'Hey Monkey,' you love it, because that's all you are." Yikes. Now, in a rare soft moment, Peter Tork from the Monkees said Lennon once privately admitted he liked some of their songs. But public image was everything back then, and John wasn't about to let the world think he had a soft spot for a band made in a casting room. Number 5. The Rolling Stones. So everyone knows the Beatles versus Stones rivalry, right? It was the pop culture clash of the century, painted as this cheeky, media-driven showdown, like Coke versus Pepsi, Xbox versus PlayStation, but with more eyeliner and tighter pants. On the surface, it was playful, 2 bands ruling the world, sharing the charts, and swapping compliments in interviews. But for Lennon, oh, it ran way deeper than that. He wasn't just tossing jabs for headlines. He was, quite frankly, unimpressed. And unlike Paul, who tended to keep things civil, Lennon didn't mind drawing blood. He once told a photographer point blank, "They're always 2 years and 3 steps behind us. Not kind of behind, not sometimes similar, always." That wasn't a passing remark, it was practically a core belief. During the Beatles' White Album sessions, Lennon reportedly rolled his eyes at the Stones still clinging to their blues roots, while the Beatles were, in his words, pushing forward. What that meant exactly, who knows? But in Lennon's mind, they were innovating, while the Stones were just vibing. And when it came to interviews, especially with Rolling Stone, which was his personal arena of truth, John didn't hold back. He once asked, "Where's their Strawberry Fields?" Like, sure, they could do rock and swagger, but where were their moments, their mind-bending masterpieces? That one stung, but the real drama. That unfolded during the filming of the Rock and Roll Circus. Lennon, probably halfway through a bottle and feeling bold, allegedly turned to Mick Jagger and said, "You can swivel your hips till they fall off, but you're still singing our leftovers." It wasn't just shade, it was full cloud cover. And Mick, not one to take insults lying down, shot back, "At least I know who I am. Still figuring that out, are you, John?" That's a mic drop and a therapy referral in one. Yet despite all the digs, Lennon had his moments of fairness. Just weeks before his death, he told an interviewer the Stones do what they do perfectly, but then added, "I just don't want to be doing it." Translation? He respected the game, but didn't want to play by their rules. Like saying, "Yeah, you're good. I just prefer playing chess while you're busy perfecting beer pong." That was Lennon, brutally honest, contradictory, and always, always armed with a comeback. Number 4, Led Zeppelin. Now, you'd think a band like Led Zeppelin, with their thunderous guitars, mystical lyrics, and stadium-shaking presence, would at least earn a nod of approval from a fellow rock legend like Lennon, right? Wrong. To John, Led Zeppelin wasn't groundbreaking. They were just loud, like, "Somebody turn off that bloody racket before I hurl this teacup," loud. The whole thing apparently kicked off at a party in 1969. Zeppelin's debut album was spinning in the background, and Lennon, never one to hide his feelings, reacted like someone had just stepped on a cat. He supposedly plugged his ears and made a face that screamed, "What is this noise? And why is it assaulting my soul?" When someone informed him it was Jimmy Page's new band, Lennon reportedly grumbled something about how Jimmy should have just stuck to session work where at least he played decent songs. That's British for ouch. His distaste only grew. Lennon hated Robert Plant's wailing vocals. He once described them as mystical gibberish sung by a guy caught in a bear trap. And when Stairway to Heaven came on the radio, legend says Lennon would physically plug his ears and mutter 8 minutes of nonsense and a guitar solo that sounds like someone strangling a cat. It's brutal, it's poetic, it's classic Lennon. But here's the kicker. Wait, scratch that, we're not saying that. Here's the twist. Despite all the trash talk, Lennon couldn't help but give Zeppelin some credit. He once admitted, albeit grudgingly, that he admired how they made heaps of money without completely selling out. "Those Zeppelin boys know how to make money without making fools of themselves," he said, which in Lennon speak is like a standing ovation, or at least a slow clap, behind closed doors. So yeah, Zeppelin might have had the riffs, the fans, and the legend status. But to John Lennon, they still sounded like the world's most expensive garage band. Number 3. The Bee Gees. Disco fever was burning up the charts, sequins were everywhere, hips were shaking like seismic events, and the Bee Gees were the shimmering, falsetto-fueled kings of it all. But while most of the world was staying alive on the dance floor, John Lennon was somewhere in New York, grimacing. To him, the Bee Gees weren't trendsetters, they were glitter-drenched imposters. Even before the disco takeover, John had his issues. When the Bee Gees started dabbling in psychedelic sounds in the late 60s, territory the Beatles basically invented, Lennon was already rolling his eyes. He dismissed them as Beatles without the humor, intelligence, or talent. Just the haircuts, apparently. And when Saturday Night Fever exploded into a full-blown cultural moment, John didn't just cringe, he fumed. At one dinner party, he reportedly said, "The Bee Gees are proof people will buy anything if you market it right." Oof, that's the kind of comment that stings more the longer you sit with it. But the real scorcher came during a Playboy interview. Off the record, Lennon allegedly described listening to the Bee Gees as being strangled while someone pours honey in your ear, which is vivid. Also probably the most disgustingly creative way anyone's ever described a pop vocal. And to make sure the point landed, he reportedly imitated their falsetto while mock-choking himself. Lennon didn't just throw shade, he installed blackout curtains. What makes this feud extra painful is that the Bee Gees were massive Beatles fans. Maurice Gibb even said Lennon's comments broke my heart. Imagine hearing that from your hero. But John? He never sugarcoated things. If he didn't like your music, he'd let the world know. If he did like you, chances are he'd never say it out loud. That was Lennon, brilliant, brutal, and rarely in between. Number 2, Wings. Plot twist, one of Lennon's most intense feuds wasn't with a rival band or some disco chart topper. It was with his ex-bandmate's new band. That's right, Paul McCartney's Wings. To most people, Wings was just Paul trying to keep the music going. But to John, it wasn't just a weak follow-up, it felt like a betrayal. The moment Wings dropped their first single, Give Ireland Back to the Irish, John reportedly lost it. According to those close to him, he didn't just dislike it, he raged. He hurled the record across the room and called it political posturing, from, as he so lovingly put it, Mr. Thumbs Aloft. He even claimed Paul wouldn't be able to find Ireland on a map. That's cold, even for John. But the real venom came in interviews. This wasn't subtle shade, this was full-on torch and burn. He started referring to Wings as Paul McCartney and the Plastic Max, mocking both the music and the message. And when Paul was out selling out stadiums on his 1976 world tour, a reporter asked John what he thought. His response? He's playing Beatles songs to Beatles fans and pretending it's something new. My 3-year-old could pull that off. You can practically hear the eye roll. Now sure, it's tempting to say, well, John was just jealous. But according to Yoko, it wasn't about envy, it was about heartbreak. John wasn't mad that Paul was successful. He was mad that Paul, in his eyes, wasn't aiming higher. Lennon believed his old friend was capable of magic, and instead he saw Wings as Paul playing it safe, cashing in on nostalgia and losing his artistic bite. In a rare moment of honesty, John once said, "I hate what he's doing with his talent. He's capable of so much more. That's not a diss, that's disappointment. This wasn't just beef, it was brotherhood gone sour. Two friends, two geniuses who once ruled the world together, now standing on opposite sides of the same stage. Number 1, the Beatles, and now, for the biggest shock of all. The band John Lennon hated most was the Beatles. Yep, the band that made him famous. The band he helped create from scratch with his best friend. The band whose lyrics are printed on t-shirts, covered by everyone from orchestras to garage bands, and whose songs are basically a rite of passage for any kid learning guitar. That Beatles. To most of the world, they were gods. But to John, they became a cage. He once told a journalist, "The Beatles were the biggest trap I ever fell into." That wasn't just bitterness talking, it was exhaustion. He described it as suffocating, like he was trapped inside a cartoon version of himself, wrapped in screaming teenage fans, PR appearances, and those same old matching suits. It stopped being music and started feeling like a brand. A prison where the bars were made of hit records. People close to him said he couldn't stand how everyone froze him in amber, as if he never changed after 1964. Interviewers would bring up She Loves You while he was trying to make sense of who he was as a solo artist. Fans would walk up and start humming Help, and he'd quietly bristle. At one point, he reportedly said, "That person doesn't exist anymore." He wasn't trying to be rude, he was trying to move on. Even when he was making his final album, Double Fantasy, Lennon reportedly refused to play or reference any Beatles songs in the studio. Not out of hate, but because, in his words, he'd spent years trying to escape that version of himself. It was a breakup with his own legacy. And yet, in one of his final interviews, just days before his death, he finally cracked that armor. He said, "I'm proud of the music we made. I just needed to find out who John Lennon was apart from it." That's the full circle. The guy who burned bridges with guitar strings eventually looked back, not in anger, but with clarity. Turns out the hardest band to forgive was the one he helped build. Because sometimes the thing that launches you the farthest is also the thing you spend the rest of your life trying to outrun. So yeah, John Lennon wasn't just the dreamer who sang about peace and love. He was also the guy who could tear down entire bands with a single line and make it sting for decades. Behind the melodies and mantras was a guy wrestling with fame, identity, and a music industry he often loathed, even as he helped build it. Love him or not, Lennon never faked how he felt. And in a world full of PR-polished soundbites, that kind of raw honesty, it's rare. If you made it this far, you clearly vibe with the deep cuts of music history, and I like that about you. Hit that like button if Lennon's roasts gave you whiplash, subscribe if you want more brutally honest takes from the legends of music, and drop a comment below. Which one of these band feuds surprised you the most? Or did you always suspect the guy who wrote Imagine also had an inner savage? Thanks for watching, and as always, keep your ears open, your records spinning, and your opinions loud.